This Master Tier player has a 71% win rate with AP Kog'Maw bot lane, where he one-shots enemy backlines from such absurd range, he's literally off the screen when he kills them with living artillery. But the thing is, this playstyle doesn't even really require any skill. It's almost impossible to stop early, and late game it's impossible to avoid, which makes it super good for solo queue. The problem with on-hit Kog'Maw is he's incredibly short range, which makes him almost completely reliant on his W 17-second cooldown. That means he gets bullied by almost every other ADC. And the thing is, Kog'Maw is actually one of the best bot lane mages in the game. Every one of your damage spells has over 1200 range, your Q reduces magic resist, increasing the damage of your other spells, and your ult's range is like having a permanent Xerath ult. The only real weakness he has is his early game, which is exactly why he plays bot lane. Having a support allows you to play a lot more aggressively in lane. A CC champion basically guarantees you hit your full spell rotation, chunking the enemy with your nutty AP scalings. And the damage your support deals also gets your target closer to your ult's execution threshold as well, plus it's just a safer lane generally because you can only get ganked from one side. But even though your early game is your weakest point, you are by no means weak in the early game. Void Ooze is probably one of the most broken wave clear spells in the game. So much so you can use it to essentially force your opponent to ignore you, giving you a free lane to completely skip your weak early game. And to do that, all you need to do is push waves. If you let the wave push into you, you'll end up getting outranged and auto down by almost every other ADC in the game. So you want to use your E almost exclusively for wave clear. At the beginning, that means trying to hit as many minions as possible with it, doing 600 plus damage to each minion wave, a damage number that no ADC in the game will ever be able to keep up with. But as you get closer to your level 6 power spike, you'll want to start poking your enemy as well, so that they're closer to the execute threshold for when you level up your ult, which means more evenly splitting your E's damage between the wave and your laner, usually trying to hit the melee minions at the same time as your opponent. Failing that, you can just continue to spam push the wave and punish them with your E under turret, using your W's extra range to get tower plates untouched. Overall, this is semi-impossible to play against because your opponents have to ignore you so that they can CS themselves, leaving you to poke them down with your Q at the same time as getting uncontested minions, essentially giving you a free lane to do whatever you want. But the best part about this is your opponent doesn't really have anywhere to go. The only way to block your Q's high base damage is to stand in the minion wave. But standing in the minion wave guarantees they get hit by Void Ooze. So the whole lane is sort of a minefield in a 1000 unit radius around you. And whilst your ult makes this even more obnoxious to play against, the most ridiculous early game power spike you have comes once you buy Ludens at around level 9. Now all you need to do is either wave once and ult the frontline minions, and the entire wave is cleared from 1200 plus range with just 2 spells. Plus, Luden's isolated passive does a shitload of damage, with a full spell rotation already pretty much deleting your entire enemy's health bar. At this point, you also have such insane wave clear, your CS per minute is through the roof, which gives you somewhat error-free gold income that's essentially impossible to do wrong. So even though your early game is your weakest point, quote-unquote, that's only on paper, because in practice, you don't really have an early game since you can just clear waves and force your opponent to ignore you. This same non-interactive trading pattern then continues into the mid-game as you move mid with your support, but now you can also use your range of damage to oppress your opponents as they move to Herald and Dragon. Because you're permanently pushing waves, you have permanent priority, which essentially gives you full control over mid lane entrances to either Drake or Herald. So depending on which one you're going for, you can abuse your absurd range to pepper your opponents from the shadows whilst your jungler takes the objective stress-free. When it comes to your core build, because you're playing this like a burst mage assassin, your aim is to kill targets in a single spell rotation. You always go Luden's first item since it's the highest damage mana item for mages. But after that, you have 3 different options. If you're against a tanky team, second item Horizon Focus gives you a % damage increase you can use to deal with their scaling resistances and health bars. Shadow Flame gives you the most burst possible with its flat pen and double crit on your ult's execute, which makes it insanely efficient against squishier team comps, and Storm Surge's move speed passive is amazing for repositioning to either dodge spells or chase people on the edge of your ult's range. And once you have your second item, you easily have enough damage to be a one-shot threat to squishy targets, something which most people are not used to experiencing from a Kog'Maw. So if they misstep and put themselves within 1000 units of you, you can punish them to the point of death with just your EQ and a single ult. One quick little tip, you always want to be hitting your Q first on a target because it reduces a champion's magic resist, but because its missile speed is slightly higher than Void Ooze's, you can E then Q, that way the ball at the front of your E also hides the animation of your Q, with Caustic Spittle's resistance reduction still hitting first. Your last massive power spike is when you hit level 16 screen and unlock your final ult range, I am not joking when I say it is literally off the screen. Its range is so absurd that you can poke the backline of the enemy team from the backline of your own team. In team fights, you should always be aiming your ult slightly behind the squishy targets you're trying to hit. That way they have to walk toward your front line and also stay within your range just to avoid it. But when it comes to rounding out your build for these team fights, if the enemy team has a lot of magic resist, you can't go wrong with the Void Staff. If they're stacking most of the HP, you take Leandries, and if the enemy team's squishy and you haven't built it already, Horizon Focus is also a very good third item. But because you want to be shitting out ults like there's no tomorrow, you're going to need a second mana item, which is where Malignance comes in as a fourth pickup, since it gives you more damage and resistance shred with the passive and the mana needed to bombard people with living artillery. Your last item's generally going to be a Rabadon's for even more damage, but you can also go for a Zhonya's or a Banshee's if you need protection from would-be assassins. The very last thing to mention is your rune setup. As we said before, the only weakness AP Cog really has is his early game, which is why your runes are wholly focused around the early game. You take Comet since it's guaranteed to hit off your ease, damage, and slow. Mana Flow Band and Presence of Mind give you the mana needed to spam spells, and because you're mostly playing at the 1200 plus range of your Q&E, you're generally out of reach and healthy, so you can make use of Absolute Focus's stats very efficiently. Scorch's early game damage is also kind of unrivaled, and Cut Down helps you get people into your ult's execution range much quicker as well. And that's pretty much it. AP Kog'Maw is not this troll mid lane pick you might think it is, and it's honestly got a semi-flawless gameplay loop bot lane that's very difficult to deal with at almost every stage of the game. So let us know what you think about it in the comments below, but until next time, good luck and have fun.